everyone, Stephanie with the patient story again, back with part 4 of Rich's story. Now, he just got done sharing about how he had to advocate for himself to get the answers that he was looking for and how he was able to understand better his treatment options for his stage 3B melanoma. Now, in this segment, he goes into detail about entertaining the idea of participating in a clinical trial for his first treatment.
Everything is kind of guiding us towards immunotherapy these days, which I had never heard of a year ago before starting down this path. And, that's going to be the recommended approach, what they call the baseline, treatment arm of a clinical trial, versus like what most clinical trials are going to have that as a treatment arm plus something extra that they're trying to test out efficacy.
Right? It was, you're going to be either 50% chance on this standard of care that we're already, have patients going through versus adding this extra drug to see if that actually increases the efficacy and the response rates. First, though, people get really nervous because clinical trial, it sounds like a clinical trial. It's like they think of guinea pig. What was your first response? Because you said it took you a week to raise your hand when you were considering this.
Yeah, I think even before going into this and where like clinical trials even became a possibility, I had this misconception that clinical trials were either you get randomized into like a placebo, which is like no treatment, or you get like the miracle medicine, and there's like that's what it is. And I don't know. I feel embarrassed to say it, but I think I'm not alone, and I think it's really important. Just to put my personal embarrassment out there for others, and it's okay, but that's not how these things work. You're going to get treated, and it really is, especially in the melanoma world as it is, today in 2022, you have that immunotherapy as a baseline treatment, and that will be your minimum. If you get randomized into that 50%, you'll know it going in, and you'll just be receiving basically the same treatment you would at any other place with your oncologist. Or if you get randomized into, my particular clinical trial was testing out immunotherapy with interleukins, which is basically a little bit more targeted, and it's all around trying to reduce kind of future recurrence for me. But the treatment arms would be the same, most likely, if I was even stage 4.
And so when you it took you about a week, right, to process that you would raise your hand and do this. What were your considerations?
Yeah. So a lot of things floating in my head, right? I'm still kind of in a somewhat of a relief mode that, I'm a stage 3B, but I'm trying to like figure out what the next year is going to be like. And I would have to, in my own personal journey for this clinical trial, I would have to, be traveling a good 3+ hours of commute to be a part of the study. And so that's, a year's worth of going to an infusion center with that level of travel commitment, plus probably a ton of extra scans and blood tests, and just like beyond what you would normally get, just because there's a lot more rigor to clinical trials, and you're going to get poked and prodded and scanned a little bit more based on whatever the rigor is for that particular study. So I was figuring out more or less like the burden like on me to enter this phase, like not knowing where I was going to get randomized, and whether or not like that would be worth the extra potential protection I would get if I got randomized into the arm that had the interleukin portion. Plus the other factor is I wanted to take my situation and turn it into a positive, and if I could be a part of continued research and giving back, I wanted to try and do that as well.
You were considering all these different factors. You decide, yes, okay. And then what was the process in terms of onboarding onto a clinical trial?
So once I said yes, I had to go up, to the facility. That's, a little bit of a commute for me, sign a ton of paperwork. It was probably took a good hour to sign all the documents that were required to sign in terms of just giving them all access to everything, including like HIV status, like basically everything about my medical history would be part of the study, of course. And then I would have to more or less redo all of my scans and blood work because again, there's a particular way that each study wants its scans to be done, wants its blood work to be done. So I went and did a full day of MRIs, PETs, everything, blood work, just to try to get it all done at once and minimize my trips up there. And then it was a wait and see if I got randomized. Once I kind of did all the pre-work, then you kind of wait and see what the coin flip's going to be, if you're going to go to baseline treatment or the study treatment.
You sent me one of the sort of packets of information that you were given for this clinical trial. It was 52 pages for Google Docs anyway. So when you were reading some of these things, or I mean, like, did you, first of all, it's 52 pages. Did you like actually sit there and read everything? Like how, and what are you thinking when you're, being hit with all this information?
It's a lot. As a non-medical professional, a lot of this stuff is just going to go over your head. It can be pretty intimidating. I had my sister here that would read through all 50 plus pages multiple times and distilled it down for me and added a little bit to my takeaways, but more or less the way it was explained to me by the researchers that were conducting the study. They had a pretty good summary of what it was, so I think they were able to distill. They did a great job of distilling all that 52 pages down to human speak.
When you are going through, before you find out whether which group you've been randomized into, is there anything else going through your head about taking part in a clinical trial, knowing that you may be commuting so much and spending a lot of time and extra time doing scans, and that it's going to be, you're under a microscope really because you're part of this research, and anything, I guess, in terms of guidance to people who are considering it as well?
Yeah, I think just if you take a step back, it's going to be an extra burden on you as a patient in terms of time, needle pokes, scans, these types of things. But there's also a potential benefit, I think, making sure that like all of your scans are scrutinized. You're getting extra blood work, extra all these things can give you a lot more confidence that if they do find something along the way, they'll probably catch it like sooner than you are if you're not on a clinical trial. So there's a benefit there. So everything comes with a cost benefit, and you kind of have to factor that into your own journey, as well as, I think the part about contributing back, to future cancer patients and how much that weighs into your decision making. There's no wrong in any of it.
Yeah, I mean, and people have to think of for themselves too, right? I mean, it's in another way, clinical trials is accessing tomorrow's treatment today. That's the hope, is that you get access now.
Yeah.
But there are real considerations here for a lot of people, and one is, well, people wonder about, do you have to work through insurance? And a lot of these there's a sponsor, and it should be at no cost. But was this, was this described to you? Did you have to consider anything with payment?
I am so glad you asked this question. I had actually forgotten about this because there was some language within the clinical trial paperwork that mentioned patient responsibility for things not covered. And I remember asking that specifically, to the doctors that were running the clinical trial, and they kind of glaze over it. It's like, no, I wouldn't worry about that, but it is there in black and white, and it is a little unnerving. And it's really non-patient friendly language. Like, you're putting yourself out there for extra exposure, expensive tests, and for having language there that says, oh, if your insurance doesn't cover this, then you have the responsibility because you opted into trying to be helpful. something to always ask for and read about. But I don't know if you're going to get great answers at the end of the day. I think that's just where these things are.
And I'm glad you shared that experience because, yeah, I've heard this from different, they call them investigators, right? Like the oncologists who are like, helping to run these studies at their centers. And it's like, it varies. You have different sponsors, there's different coverage. Is there someone you hope that there are people like clinical trial nurses I know are really helpful for a lot of things, but it's going to be, again, varying degrees of the experience you get as a patient. So hopefully you have someone who can walk you through and translate because it is a lot. And these are very expensive drugs. So you don't want to be like, hey, I'm signing all these things. And oh, this person said it's fine. So I guess it's fine. It's unnerving, right? That's what you felt. It was.
Yeah. And, it can vary. It varies by every situation, every, insurance coverage, doctor, all that stuff. And I remember my sister caught this, and I know it's in my question doc that we have. And I know the language in there. I don't even have to read it. She says, this is very unpatient friendly language. I ask the investigator about this. It was like one of my top 3 questions.
Okay. So at the end of the day, you get the, update. You are going to be in the control, or you're in the control arm, meaning you would be undergoing the same treatment that is standard of care anyway, right? So what was your reaction? What was your decision-making process then?
Yeah, of course. I think I had already like prescribed my decision making that had I got randomized to the non-baseline arm, so like the extra medicine arm, I was going to do it. It was going to be worth the burden for me, and I was doing everything I could possibly do for myself to just improve my survivability. Right, I believed in everything I was reading with the drug combinations and was willing to add the extra inconvenience for myself, but also putting myself out there for, probably a greater risk of side effects, which we can get into because that's the other thing we haven't talked about with clinical trials is if you're going into a place, it's a little bit more unknown as to what to expect and how your body's going to react because less patients have gone through that.
I would definitely like to like dedicate time to that too, because one of the considerations is quality of life versus extension of life or survival. But it's a very real conversation for people. And I think for people who aren't in the shoes of patients, it's like, well, obviously you want to live a longer life, but these
Mm.
are very real impacts because for some of these side effects, it's extremely hard to even feel like you're living any quality of life, right?
Yeah, well, I would say, I think this is where like everybody's journey is individual, and I can't tell you how many times I've been told how young I am, like along the journey that like I'm 47, and the fact that that should factor into I'm less likely, or I'm probably going to be more capable of handling side effects, and I think that's why I was such a great candidate for a clinical trial. They wanted to run somebody through that was young as it were and healthy, run marathons and all that, that I would probably be able to tolerate side effects. But you're exactly right. I'm in a place where I was really willing to take on any side effects. That's just kind of where I am in my journey, and I was going to do anything I could at any cost to improve survivability was my number one thing.
I'm very thankful you brought that up too, because yeah, age, they talk about this too. They say age and comorbidities, AKA if there are other health ailments or something, that other people have to contend with, it all factors into how well you'll do on a clinical trial and testing something new. So for you, you decide, okay, this is too much of a burden. This is standard of care anyway. I have somewhere I can go, which is just down the street. Can you tell us more about what that treatment is? I know you're in that regimen now.
Yeah. So unfortunately for me, I got randomized into the baseline treatment. And at that point, I was debating. So I'm going to take the burden of inconvenience and not knowing how I was going to react to even that baseline treatment. Was that going to be worth it for me personally versus like basically I'm doing this for others, and I think it was at that moment where I was like, I think I need to be selfish here. I think this extra burden is going to be a little bit too much for me to take on. Well, I am going into the unknown of going down, like I've got a year of treatment in front of me and I don't know what that's going to be like. I can just take all of that extra complication on my life, go back to a baseline treatment that's closer to home and just like will fit more into my life, and whatever comes my way, I'll probably be better able to handle it. So that was the decision making process for me. I still feel a little guilty of choosing myself, but at the end of the day, I think I don't know, I think it was the right choice for me.
And I also want to highlight this really quickly, just because I think people will probably need to hear this. It is your decision. It is absolutely, you in this message of advocacy that you've been highlighting, Rich. It starts with that, right? It's advocating for yourself, and you have to start there. And I like to use the word self, or the phrase self-focused, as opposed to selfish. It's the same thing, but there's just a negative
Yeah,
connotation.
I like that.
Selfish. And being self-focused is, who else is going to look out for you but you, right? So I'm, glad to hear you made that decision for yourself.